Okay, so here's some more practice with evaluating expressions. Notice they say that they want us to replace all of the x's with -5, right? And they want us to replace the y with 2. So the very first step that I want to see is what I call the substitution step. The substitution step is when you are just substituting and taking out the letters and putting the numbers in place and using correct notation. But we're not doing any math at this time. So remember, this means 3 times x. So you can either write 3 times a -5, but I would prefer you to use the parentheses to show multiplication. So 3 times -5. Then I'm recopying this plus sign. And then y gets replaced with 2. And then I'm recopying this minus sign. And then x happens to be a -5, right? X is a -5. So because that's a negative, I'm going to put that in parentheses too. So that's what everybody's first line should look like. And then we want you to do order of operations one step at a time. So remember, you should multiply first. So 3 times -5 is a -15 because you have different signs. And then we're going to add because it came first. So we have -15 plus 2. So don't we have more negatives than positives? Isn't that a -13? And then we're going to do subtraction by changing subtraction to addition, as long as we change the next number to its opposite. So now it is an adding problem. So we have 13 negatives and 5 positives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13 negatives and 5 positives. And if we collect our zeros, doesn't that leave me with a -8 left over? So that's your answer for that problem. On this problem, they want us to replace the c with -2. So -2 minus, and then b they want us to replace with 9 plus. And remember, when you have a base, you want to put a parentheses just around where the base used to be. And be careful, because some of you were substituting +4 when it says to put in a -4 for a. So you got to make sure that when you're substituting, you're not making error when you substitute. And then we do order of operations. Remember, we must do exponents first. So we're going to recopy. And remember, -4 squared means a -4 times another -4, which is a positive 16. Some of you on your homework were saying -16. Then we're going to subtract because it came first. So we're going to change subtraction to add the opposite. And 2 negatives plus 9 more negatives is 11 negatives. Then we can add -11 plus 16. Don't we have more positives than negatives? Matter of fact, don't we have 5 more positives? So that's the expectation of what your work should look like. Be careful, make sure that you're putting a parentheses around just the base. That has to be there. And then make sure that you're doing order of operations. So exponents first, then subtraction because it came first, and then you can do the adding last in this particular problem. In this problem, we have absolute values. You must make sure that when you're recopying, you don't leave out those absolute values. So we have an absolute value. They want us to replace x with -4, and then there's a subtraction, and then they want y to be placed with 3. So you have to have, that is your first step. And then order of operations says we have to do what's inside the absolute value first. So we have a subtraction, so we're going to change it to add the opposite. So isn't a -4 plus a -3 a -7? Then you can take the absolute value of -7, which is how far is -7 from 0? It is 7 units. So those are the steps that you need to have on your paper. You need to make sure that you're not leaving out your absolute values in step 2 and 1. In this problem, again, we have a base that's being squared, so you need to have a parentheses around that at all times when you're substituting. So we have y squared, and didn't they ask us to substitute -3 for y? So make sure you put in a -3 minus 2. Remember, that means times. So you want to emphasize that that means times the square root, and then x, they want x to be replaced with 9, and then minus, and then z happens to be a negative. So because that's a negative, we're going to put another parentheses. So that's what everybody's first substitution step should look like. Notice I didn't do any math, but I used the parentheses around just the base. Because I had a minus sign, I went ahead and put another parentheses to keep that -6 away from that subtraction. Now we're going to do order of operations. So what is a -3 squared? Remember, that is a -3 times another -3. So that is +9 minus 2 times square root of 9 is 3, and then minus a -6. That's what your second line should look like. Now, according to order of operations, we're going to multiply next. So we're going to recopy 9 minus, and then 2 times 3 is 6, and then minus a -6. That's what everybody's third line should look like. We're going to change subtraction to add the opposite, and that will give us +3 minus a -6, and then we can change this to add its opposite, and then we get 9. So that's your steps for this problem. Don't forget, it's smart to pause the tape and copy down the problem and take good notes, and then use your notes on your homework. Sometimes try the problem before you watch me, and then you can go back and see where maybe you made a mistake. Maybe try that on the next one. Okay, so on this problem, remember you have the square root symbol. Make sure you go all the way out, and then whenever you have a base, you must have parentheses around just the base. So b is being squared, and they want us to replace b with -5 minus, and remember this means 4 times a times c. So we're going to say 4 times a times c, and we should go all the way out to the edge. Then we perform order of operations. So we must do the exponents first, and then we can do the multiplication. We still need the square root, and remember, a -5 squared means a -5 times another -5, which is a +25. Recopy the minus, and then 4 times 2 times 2 is 8 times 2, which is 16. Then we can do 25 subtract 16, which is 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. Make sure that you go all the way out and that you put that parentheses around that base that goes with that exponent, and use correct notation to show 4 times a times c. And then you might, if you can do that in your head, great. If you need to do it off to the side to help you process that this turn out to be 16, and make sure you have all those steps. So this is your first step, then your second step, your third step, and your last step. Last problem. Remember, this means -2 times a. So when you're substituting, it's -2 times 6, and then b is supposed to be replaced with -10. So it's -10 plus, and c is replaced with 7. So that should be your first step. Then we're going to multiply the numerators. So -2 times 6 is a -12. And we're also going to add -10 plus 7 is a -3. So this should be your second step, and this should be your first step. And then doesn't this say -12 divided by -3? And isn't a -12 divided by a negative, isn't that a +4? Remember, when the signs are the same, it is a positive when you're multiplying and dividing. So I hope this will help you with your homework.